I used to tell my team members, don't be attached to a title, don't be attached to a moment, be attached to the work and the mission. Because if you're willing to go where the mission is, in whatever title or role that you are being handed, you will be able to find that joy and that fulfillment. And that mindset has always served me well.
Welcome to our space, our arena, as Paul likes to refer to it, where we connect, collaborate, and co-create. I'm Ed.
And I'm Paul.
And this is the Thought Partners Podcast.
Today we are joined by someone who embodies what it means to reimagine and to reach. Our dear friend, Dr. Lauren Segura, not Lauren Phillip, is a brilliant thinker, a trusted colleague, and a dear friend. For decades, she has built an extraordinary career in academic and professional service. She brings rigor, care, and integrity to everything she touches. And now she's at another threshold of something new, always reimagining and designing the next chapter to see what it can look like after years of success. And Lauren's journey reminds us that growth doesn't end when you've achieved a title or a credential. It's a lifelong practice. And she is a model for curiosity, resilience, and a willingness to stretch beyond the familiar, which is exactly what we will be exploring in this episode. And what excites me about having Lauren here is not just her impressive background, but her heart. Lauren lifts others up and stays anchored, and has kept me anchored over the years. And today she is generously inviting us into her process of reimagining in a living conversation right here on the Thought Partners Podcast. So as you listen, I encourage you, friends, to notice the principles at play and the courage it takes to challenge assumptions, the clarity that comes from reflection, and the creativity required to co-create new possibilities. Lauren, welcome to the Thought Partners Podcast. We are so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I am so humbled both to be considered for this type of a conversation and by your kind words. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited to co-create with you.
Right to the co-create. That's why we love you, Lauren.
Well,
When Paul and I initially thought about this conversation, we thought about using the guiding question of what does it take to reimagine yourself, and what does that mean for reinvention and to relaunch everything about you. Before we get into that, though, I'd love to give you a little bit of space to give us a quick flyby about what it's like to be you, how you came to be this amazing human being you are, and a little bit into the behind the curtain.
Yeah, what are you up to these days, Lauren?
that is very kind of you. It's been a little bit of a journey, which will give you some context on this concept of reimagining. Actually, maybe it makes sense to go right to the beginning. When I was 22 and I went to graduate school to do my PhD in literature, I was really, really convinced that the answer to that was I wanted to be a professor of romantic literature. I absolutely loved the poetry, and I still do. And poetry is what drove me there. So I'm sitting in my dorm room as a college student. I'm reading Percy Shelley's Alastor, and I encounter in the introduction a Wordsworth quote that is, "The good die first, and those whose hearts are filled with dust burn to the socket." And I ran up to my advisor's office in tears, going, I don't want to go to law school. That was the path I thought I was on. Like, I want to be a professor of romantic literature. And thanks to some good advising, I was sent down that path. But when I came out of graduate school and I was no longer 22 and I had a family, and it wasn't so easy to just imagine picking up and relocating anywhere. I had to do my first career reinvention. So it started right off the bat. And I really had to confront what was important to me. Was it the poetry? Certainly it is, but, does that mean I have to form a career around it? I can read that on my own, I can write about it. Or is it the helping people? So what it meant was I really had to do some time with like thinking about that question you just asked me. Who is Lauren Segura, not Lauren Phillip at the time? I had to get really clear on my values and really clear on my professional non-negotiable. When I really sat down and thought about it, it was not teaching content per se, but it was very much helping people. It was very much taking care of others, including my family. And it was very much about the ability to be authentic. And if I could have those three things, then all the rest was gravy. And it made me realize that you don't necessarily have to be attached to a title or a concept, but you have to stay true to your values. And that principle has guided me well in terms of where my personal and professional paths take me. It leads me to community volunteer. I'm a big animal lover as well as a lover of humans. So I community volunteer both for people and animals. And we rescue. We have rescue pets, my wife and I. We have a rescue dog and two rescue cats. And even my horse is, like I like to say, a recycled racehorse. So very much a fan of second chances and reinvention on every level.
I love when you post pictures of your horse
He is
and the
very handsome.
horses.
I used to take a zillion pictures, and Paul, you're wondering why I don't post quite as much. He gets very angry when the phone comes out. So I have been respecting his boundary
Oh.
and minimizing picture time.
What happens when the phone comes out? What do you mean he gets very angry?
The ears go back and he pouts and he makes faces. He's much happier when he is my full focus, and he deserves that time. So um, I am very much a believer in respecting boundaries and a believer in meeting people and animals where they are. And so the phone stays in the car.
The last time Paul and I were together, one of the things that we talked about were those professional and personal non negotiables. I would love to hear more about how you came to your professional non negotiables.
Yeah, because they were very clear, Lauren, and I noticed that too.
Mine were super messy and all over the place. Yours, clear, streamlined.
How did you go about discovering what those were?
Well, I mean, it is a messy process. You all get to hear the end result of it, where I'm able to distill it down into sound bites. But what we don't always see is the work that goes into that. It goes along with what it takes to reimagine, right? While the outward facing ideas may be very simple and streamlined and easy to wrap your mind around, the process, whether you're designing something, designing learning, or redesigning your own path, it takes a lot of reflection, a lot of internal work, and it is messy work. You have to be really willing to dig and think and write. I do a lot of journaling. I try to do it weekly to think about where I'm at, what's important. And I think it's also a matter of asking the right questions. One of the things that really stuck with me from my grad school mentor was when she talked to me about what it was to get a PhD. She said, Lauren, we're not about finding all the answers. We're about learning to ask the right question. And that has always really stuck with me. That when you think about the right questions, or putting it differently, you're thinking intentionally about what's important, what you want, whatever the case may be. In this case, what is important to you? What are the three things you cannot live without? um, it helps you to kind of find clarity. I'm a big believer in intentionality, and I'm a big believer in alignment. And I am always trying to use those principles to get to clarity. When I sit down, I start with questions. And by finding the right questions, which for me were what is important, what are the things you can't live without? Is it this or that? Sometimes simplifying rather than making it more complex. I was able to kind of get to that answer. And, who knows? Things might change. These days, I have a fourth. And I have learned through some of my professional experiences that innovation is something that's really important to me. All that to say that part of it is also, too, being able to pause and reflect. It's not always easy in our fast paced, complicated days, but finding that time to think intentionally about how the work made you feel. Are you the best version of you? What went on in your day? Are you spending a lot of time disengaging and scrolling on your phone? Or do you find that you haven't looked at your phone all day and you've been deep into the work? I spend a lot of time really thinking about my behavior and what that says about where I am in my flow space. And that's really helped me a lot.
Think I'm hearing, and I've talked about this before, is such an important part of personal professional development and growth. And one of the things that too often in my experience and in the research that I've done gets overlooked, and that is that reflection piece. You must know yourself to grow yourself.
100%. I mean, and it's one of the first principles of leadership development formally, too. If you don't have time for that self reflection, then continuous learning doesn't happen. And that's really where learning transfer happens. The same is true when you are growing yourself. Like you have to take the time to stop and think, or that growth will not happen.
Lauren, you've said that your professional non negotiables include authenticity and care. Can you talk a little bit more about how those show up?
I identify very deeply as a servant leader. For me, taking care of people, taking care of culture, keeping other people top of mind is deeply important. I think you asked me before, how does that tie to who I am as a person? I'm a person who grew up with deep communal values. I'm from two immigrant cultures where communal values are very important. So I bring that piece of my identity and my background into the work. As I said, it aligns with who I am in terms of authenticity. I have never been a person who believes we are different people at work than we are at home. I mean, we maybe don't share the same details, but I am not professional Lauren and personal Lauren and civic Lauren and friend Lauren, whatever the case may be. I am one person with an integrated, complicated life. And the things that are important to me in my personal life are important to me in my professional life. And that guides the work. So kindness is important. The ability to collaborate and bring people to the table, the ability to compete with other people against myself, if that makes sense. Not a person that needs to best anybody else, but I am a person that needs to be better than I was the day before. And those things don't change, whether I'm in my personal life or I'm in my professional life. I need to be able to be in a space where I can be me. And another thing that I will say, you worked with me for many years. I'm nothing if not radically human, which I think is important in a distributed environment. When you've got team members and you're communicating remotely, radical humanity, especially in an age of tech innovation, is huge. And when I went through my latest interview process for this job, I did not hide the fact that when I managed a team, I sent policy emails from my cat. Nobody wanted to hear me talk about attendance policy, but nobody minded when it came from my cat. And you know what? My faculty members totally submitted their attendance. They'd see a picture of my cat, could text a picture, didn't have to say a word. So it sounds silly, but it was effective. And
I wanna pause you there because I want to explore something, and if Paul was jumping in, he would say he's going to pull on a thread. But I am going to jump in because I want you to take a moment, take a deep breath, and explain how your cat is more human than you alone.
absolutely. When I say radically human, the fact that my cat has a persona and my cat would tell her own story, obviously my writing. Number one, that is my human creativity. Number two, that is my quirkiness. I'm not going to try to lead or collaborate or show up to work trying to be somebody else other than I am. So, for example, humor is not my skill set. That's your skill set, Ed, right? Humor is
I told Paul in a recent episode that if I were assigning roles, I would assign him, the researcher, and me, the jester. And he laughed at me.
But absolutely, humor has always been your superpower. I am decidedly unfunny. If I am funny, you well, see, it's unintentional, right? It's unintentional, but I maybe
Decidedly
10%
unfunny. Oh my.
decidedly unfunny. But, I mean, I think I'm hilarious, but, the humor is not my skill set. If I say something funny, it's unintentional, it just happens to be absurd. And so I don't try to come from a place that isn't me. But I am quirky and I am, unique and I am creative. And I allow myself to show up that way. It takes a bit of bravery, I think. We worry a lot as people, what people think of us. We worry about executive presence, but there's a time and a place for those things, and there's a time and a place to be human. I tend to find that when we come from that place of authenticity and we're able to unlock our superpowers and get the work done, um, that tends to be a pretty positive place.
Sounds like it
Um,
makes you feel really alive.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is this, like, we spend an awful lot of time at work. If it's not fun, what are we doing?
That's what we need Ed for.
Absolutely. And I
You
will
need the jester.
every day I got to work with Ed Buchanan was the funnest day of my life.
You were very sheltered.
Lauren, where's there friction with that, with being authentic? Talk to me a little bit about where it might be challenging
Well,
to.
I think if you're authentically a jerk, that might be no. But that is some of the critique about I'm using a clean word, but that is some of the critique about the theory of authenticity. But there can be friction in terms of
It's hard to find a role or an opportunity to be your authentic self in this world or any other that I've been a part of.
it can be. It
And
certainly can be, and it depends on the culture. It can be really hard to be your authentic self in an unsafe space for sure. And I can remember a time at work where I did not feel free to be my authentic self. I shared straight out, my wife and but like when I first started that job, it wasn't so safe to say things like that.
I think you and I might have had a private conversation about that, but there were a handful of people that you would talk to about that at most.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to refer to Sherry as S because I did not want the people to know who she was and what my life structure was. And then there was a
I knew her as a letter for a good 3 years.
yeah, yeah. I think that is a place where there can be some friction, and it doesn't have to be about a personal piece of your identity. It can be anything that creates some vulnerability. If you don't have that psychologically safe environment, it can be very challenging to be authentic. And it can be really challenging to be authentic when there are organizational cultural expectations.
Well, talk to the people who are in a not a particularly safe environment, or what you call a toxic environment, or a challenging environment, or one in which maybe they haven't tested it out and they're like, I want to be authentic, but it's a scary world out here.
It can
What's
be.
I
so
need
what
the job. I need my job.
what are some small
Absolutely.
tries that they can do?
Well, in one such culture, when I first stepped into one of my recent new roles, the culture was very different than the culture I had left. There was diversity of belief very different than where I came. And there was a culture where the vibe was very different and it wasn't quite as collaborative as the culture I had left. And what that taught me was when I don't like the vibe, I'm not going to conform to the vibe. I'm going to change the vibe. And I think that is something that takes bravery, but it is a really important lesson that we as people have to learn. Anybody can be a leader regardless of their role. I wasn't in a leadership role, but I was a leader in the space because I took the initiative to model, to talk about how things were, to model behavior that I thought was important. And by the end of my tenure with this particular group of people, I mean, we had like inclusive elves and Christmas decorations, and there was a lot of collaborative work happening, a lot of thought about kindness and belief in good intention. And I'm not saying everything was perfect, but what I realized was, again, we have agency and we have to be willing to take initiative if we don't like something. And I'm done being at the mercy of circumstance. No, I'm not saying we can control everything. Certainly we can't. And unfortunately, there's a lot in our world that I wish we could control that we cannot. But on the day to day, you absolutely can shape the vibe. And if it's not successful in the way that you choose, you can also take the initiative to find a space that is aligned. And that's another thing that I think that sometimes people don't think about. A lot of times we get mired and we're in our comfort zone. I don't like this, but it's familiar. So, I'm not going to challenge it. I'm not going to step outside. I'm just going to stay here and look for different roles. And or we make long-term decisions based on short-term discomfort. All of those things never work out. What does work out, like I said, is taking that initiative and that agency up to and including, if I don't like this, where am I going to be aligned, and not being afraid to look outside.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And that starts with that understanding of self and what the values are
Absolutely.
from which to go out and notice your comfort level and what's enough, what's not enough, what's too much for you. Learn, take initiative. I love that you called out we have agency. And something you said made me think of something I've heard before, which is to be the thermostat, not a thermometer. Have you
I
heard that?
love that. I think that's a really solid analogy. Absolutely. Because we don't just respond and react to the things that are around, we can change the temperature. And that's an important distinction. I really like, Paul, that you called out that it starts with knowing self, because we cannot always control circumstance. As I said, we can act on it, we can express agency, but it's not always successful. But what we can always do is do that self work. We can control ourselves, our emotional responses, and we can control whether or not we take the time to really know what is important. When you have that sense of solid self values, the things that stay static, and you make decisions that are driven by those things, ultimately your long-term decisions will propel you forward. What that means to me is that, forward is not always in the way that we culturally think about it. I know a lot of people think of forward as up a ladder. And you know this better than anybody. You've worked with me for a long time. I've stepped in many directions in my career. I have stepped forward, I have stepped out of leadership roles. I have always followed the mission, if that makes sense. I have followed the work. I have not chased a title, because those things do not necessarily align with the things that drive me, the things that make me, the things that create that long term happiness. So, when you know what is important and your decisions are driven by that, that is when you reinvent effectively and well. Because no matter what you choose to do, the circumstances can be flexible, but what you get out of it is generally aligned with what you need. So that can't happen without reflection, and it all starts from knowing yourself.
And remembering what we can control, because earlier you also said, "Oh, we can't control everything." And I will take that a step further, my friend, and say,
Absolutely.
we don't have control over much of anything except for ourselves.
Absolutely. And actually embracing that and making decisions accordingly can bring peace instead of chaos. There's a lot of chaos that surrounds us in a lot of different ways. And sometimes career reinventions are driven by necessity, not desire. When I left higher ed the first time, I thought that was it. And I had mourned that because it wasn't necessarily a decision driven by desire. It was what I thought was best for my long-term career, viability at the time. And so I said, I'm at an age where I need to reinvent myself. I'm going to do it now because I can control this now. I can't control the circumstances, but I can control how I respond. I stepped into the federal space, and lo and behold, I was a probationary employee. And with some of the recent changes, I had to stare my biggest anxiety in the face. My biggest anxiety is breadwinner anxiety. As I've told you, taking care of my family is very much a professional non-negotiable for me. And so that thought of job loss is a very, very scary thought for me. And I mean, I came so close to having to confront this that I packed up my workspace. I really thought that I was going to be out the door. And I packed up my workspace and was going, okay, this is it. But rather than stress apply when faced with that, which to me is making long-term decisions based on short-term discomfort, rather than give in to that anxiety, I said, you know what? I'm going to have to sit with it. I cannot control whether or not I have a job tomorrow, but I can control whether or not I respond to that in a productive or a non-productive way. And so rather than spending the energy applying to hundreds of jobs that didn't necessarily meet my three professional non negotiables, I chose to sit with it. I love that phrase. And I let myself feel that anxiety and all of its stressful glory. And then I said to myself, well, what if? You know, we're so focused on what if everything goes wrong? I said, but what if it all goes right? We'll be okay. We're a strong partnership. We will figure it out. I have never in my life not been able to find some way to bring income into my life. And I have never not been able to pivot. So why wouldn't this work out too? And when it came time to apply to jobs, because I did look in that time, but I didn't, like I said, apply to hundreds of jobs. I applied to one job because that one job was a really solid fit for the things that excite me and for the things that I feel that I can bring to an organization. And it was very much aligned with my values. The organization was very aligned with my values as well. And what I found through that process, mind you, this is the job that I currently have, that alignment was there. And by taking the time to focus on what I can control and ignoring the rest that I can't as noise, I put all of my energy into that application and the results were very much worth it. So that's always going to be my advice. Do not focus on what you can't control. Put your energy into what you can.
Beautiful. And I love the what if.
Hmm.
What if?
What if?
Design thinkers ask themselves what if at least once a day.
Absolutely.
It's all about the stretch. It's all
Abs-
about growth happening on purpose, not by accident. Just what if?
I am very much a believer that to reimagine anything well, whether that is your career, whether that is some innovative idea that you're being asked to do in your workplace, you have to be able to free yourself from the constraint of thinking that it's all going to go wrong and instead believe that it's going to be successful and go right. And think again, like, what if? When it came to career reinvention, being able to pause, be thoughtful, reflective, and manage my emotion allowed me to see that it's the same skill. So those things that I did, decently well as a professional, I could also apply to my own journey if I used the same skill set and it, works well.
There are those transferable skills again, Ed. They're showing up.
'They've
100%.
transferred themselves to another podcast episode.
They have transferred themselves. And
Amazing how that happens.
They were durable skills, Paul, last time we talked about
let's
it.
try durable skills. I want to say
I heard that word today. This is the second time I've had this conversation about durable skills today.
about durable.
About durable skills, absolutely.
So, Lauren, I want to jump in here because there's a good possibility that folks that are listening to this conversation think about, I can't figure out what I'm going to have for dinner. How on earth am I going to think about the deep questions that you're bringing up? I wonder if that's maybe a space for us to co-create an on-ramp for someone to not think about necessarily the biggest, widest question they can, but how can we start along the path to getting to where you are? We're not going to get there overnight. You didn't get there overnight. I wonder if there's a way we can build something that folks that can't figure out what they want to have for dinner can still access this direction.
I mean, well, to be fair, Ed, I can't tell you that I always know what I want to have for dinner. That is in
So
some
we're going to
ways,
separate the dinner question out. If you are
yes.
a I don't know what we're going to have for dinner person, put that one on. That's not one we're going to work as controllable right now. We're going to work on something that's easier. Question mark?
I mean, first of all, I want to just stress that it starts with well being. The first thing is you have to make sure that you're in a space to be able to have those conversations. If you've got 1,000 things going on, that's maybe not the time to start, whether you're starting with an easier question or you're starting with what's the meaning of life. You want to make sure that you have the time to give it the thoughtful reflection that it deserves. So I think the first step for me in the on ramp is how do I clear space metaphorically and physically to have this conversation. And that helps me to think about what my barriers are. You know, why am I not willing to have this conversation? What is making it hard?
For me, like one of the first things that jumps to mind is, well, again, this is going to fall apart. It's not going to go the way I want it to. It's all going to be a blow up disaster. But the question that you asked earlier, what if it isn't? What if it doesn't? What if it goes well?
Hmm.
That's a really solid and refreshing way of reimagining and reframing in a way that people who maybe are just it's never gone right in quotation marks. I think that's a good way to start.
So you don't have to wait for a big thing like reimagining your career. We have those anxious moments and those questions every day. I shared with you that I am an equestrian, and sometimes I feel scared about having to jump my green horse, aka my horse who's learning how to jump around a jump course.
A rookie horse,
My
not
rookie,
literally a green horse.
exactly. But
We're
sometimes
not in the
that can
Wizard
be
of Oz,
scary.
right?
No, he is
I
not.
guess that was a Technicolor horse or
Yes,
something
he
like
is
that, though.
he is my rookie horse, right, around a jump course can be really scary, and a lot of things could go wrong, right, and if I focus on all of those things, you better bet, like, they probably will, but if I stop myself and go, "You know what? What if it all goes right? What if we jump around great? What if he's fantastic?" I find that I am not coming from that place of anxiety, and instead, I'm coming from that place of productive thought. So I encourage everybody to try it with even the smallest things that they are experiencing in their day.
And I love that you call out the other pieces too, because it's not about toxic positivity
No.
or like pretending. You scoped out for safety, you scoped out for all of the other what ifs, and let your brain imagine what if things go better than expected. Your mind starts to look for things that you think about.
I think the other question that you can ask yourself is along those lines, and it is another type of reframing. Many of us are perfectionists. I don't know anybody who is always comfortable with the thought of like, oh my God, what if this all is a disaster? And what if I fail? But we don't have to think about things as a one shot deal. Let's think like software developers and let's iterate and I like to say iterate and fail. You know, sometimes you need something to work with. So what is my starting point and then how do I build on that? And it's a way that I've often helped my students reframe things like a first draft in a writing class. You can't move forward if you don't have something to start with. So where is my starting point? What am I going to give myself to start with? And know that, you know, it doesn't always have to be where I end. Let's think about it as a process rather than a one and done.
So the first thing that I respond to is I think I'm in beta and I'm only 0.78. I'm not 1.0 yet.
That's okay.
There's your software bridge.
And everybody's timeline is different. We get so tied to these cultural narratives. And those are other good what if questions to ask. So if you need to frame it in the form of a question, right? You know, what if it takes me 5 years? So what if? So what? You know, are you learning? Are you growing? Are you finding moments of happiness along the way? There's no timeline. There's no like I have to hit this milestone at 18. I have to hit this milestone at 25. You can have goals. That's wonderful, but there is no high stakes if these things don't happen on the timeline that you are expecting. So I think another valuable step that anybody can take before they get to, let's assume it's all going to go right, is how do I close that gap between what I expect and what is? How do I find joy in the process of what is? And how do I allow what is to get me to where I want to be?
Purpose is found in pattern, and you're looking for those patterns, and I love it. And thank you. And we've spent a lot of time reflecting back, which is very important. We learned a little bit about how you think about it from a philosophical point of view. And I'm curious, forward looking. Hi, Lauren. It's been a minute since we've talked.
It
What
has.
is going on with you? What possibilities and magical, wondrous joy are you co-creating now, personally or professionally? What's going on with you?
So here I am thinking, okay, I have done my last career invention. I've learned never to say last, and I won't say it again now. But here I am stepping into a stable space, going to work in government 20 years. It'll be great. Well, that did not happen. Rather than mourn that, I said, how am I going to reinvent myself again? And the answer is, again, what are my non negotiables? What am I going to do? I found a job that was back in higher ed, which is always my passion, always worth, working for, in an innovative organization where I get to do all of the exciting transformative work, all of the AI work. And so now, not only have I entered a space where I am reimagining myself yet again, I am reimagining myself as a reimaginer who is helping my organization to take its next step as it thinks about reimagining the work and where higher ed should go. And that's a really exciting space to be.
What will you be working on in this new role?
It is to think about how we can use tech innovation to create seamless, personalized, and valuable learner experiences in which students are not at the mercy of a system, but rather they are fully embraced and supported by a system to, promote their ability to learn, to promote their ability to succeed and move forward, to promote skill transfer. And that is work that aligns on every level with the things that I think are pretty important. And it's fun.
And it's fun.
And it's fun.
Period. End of
End of
sentence.
story. Because if it's not fun, what are we doing?
The thing that I come back to is that set of questions that, Lauren, you put on the table here for us. If I had to start and I listened to this and I'm inspired and I said, well, this is great, but I don't have Lauren's resume. Or this is great. I want to switch. This field X aligns to my values, but I don't know how to get there. What's a first step that we could take?
You have to be willing to see steps as part of a bigger path. So if you just looked at things on my resume, people might question why I did certain things. For example, why did you take a job as an adjunct faculty member? Well, you never know what those opportunities are going to bring or not. Did it mean that I had to work really hard? And yes, if you look at my resume, you will see that I have only one job. That has not always been the case. My experience has been built by the fact that I have been willing to do what is needed to get to an end goal. And I gauge and I make decisions about the things I say yes and no to based on, is there opportunity? So even in reimagining my current career role, I am super hopeful that this is my last transition and I get to retire in higher ed. I don't think that there is any guarantee that that will happen. I had to ask myself, if needed to, would I be able to reinvent and respin this experience into something else again? So you always have to be willing to consider, is this opportunity something that is going to move me in whatever direction I want to move in? Is it something that is aligned with where I want my career to go? It may mean that you're stepping out of a role. And Paul, you'll remember when I stepped out of my leadership role, people thought I was nuts. They're like, what are you doing? You're stepping out of a leadership role and you're stepping into this role as a learning. I didn't even have a title. I was a mastery team member. Well, what does this mean? Did it decrease my salary? Did it decrease my ability to get joy out of my work? No. In fact, it allowed me to learn new things that ultimately brought me to a leadership role that was one of my favorite roles to date. So, you always have to be thinking about, what opportunity is it going to unlock for me? Which means you have to be a little bit forward thinking and think about your experiences, not, just as a moment in time, but as part of a wider and longer narrative.
I'm going to do a little bit of reimagination for these questions and kind of put them in one package. So correct me if I go off path, but one of the questions is, what is my story? How did I get here? Where am I going?
What's important to me?
What is important to me and what opportunities align to that?
Hmm.
And lastly, what is my next step? Not my what are 10 steps from now, but
Yeah.
what is my next step?
Yep, absolutely. What is my next step?
And how I'm going to add another one. I said last one, but how do I build momentum? How do I keep momentum going forward, sideways, backwards, up, down, underneath the rock and down and around town, whatever it is? How do I build momentum that's going to push me through whatever it is I'm looking at right now?
I was going to say one thing that we didn't talk about is, don't be afraid to use your thought partners and your downlines. Career coaching is always something that can help you kind of arrive at these answers. Because, Ed, you were asking, what if I am not a person who can easily make a decision or feels comfortable or confident asking myself these questions?
What if I can't figure out what's for dinner, Lauren?
Yep. Well, working with a thought partner can help you, or a career coach can help you. And if it's not something that, you want to pay a company to do, there are lots of people who are getting their coaching licenses who need to do 95 hours of free coaching to help you figure those things out. Yes.
Remember who you were before the title. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm picking up from you. Regardless of the title, regardless if there is a title, call me whatever title that you want. And I think I also heard a little bit of remembering that it's a journey, and the try that you tried next, the next best or the next little try, isn't the whole kit and caboodle. It's a
Mhm.
it's an infinite game.
Always. That's a great book, by the way, that I highly recommend. Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game, if you're looking to cultivate this kind of a mindset. So I love that you brought that up. I used to tell my team members, don't be attached to a title, don't be attached to a moment, be attached to the work and the mission. Because if you're willing to go where the mission is, in whatever title or role that you are being handed, you will be able to find that joy and that fulfillment. And that mindset has always served me well.
Boy, oh boy, you talk about finding joy a lot, Lauren. I love that. I look for glimmers
Me
in
too.
my day too, as I'm avoiding triggers, or at least noticing,
Mhm.
acknowledging, accepting, and addressing them. And I love to hear you say you look for joy. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for taking time out to spend with me, a dear friend for many years, and our jester Ed. It's been wonderful spending time with you. I really appreciate it.
I'm with you. And I really can't take credit for a lot of the things. I mean, these are things that I have learned from working with the both of you for many years. So the opportunity for me to share some of the ways in which you have helped me grow as a person and a professional has been my true joy. So thank you for this opportunity for that.
Well, at the end of our episode, we always turn it over to Paul to close us out. But before we do that, the podcast is now available on 3 major platforms, and our community is coming together. So if you've tried out any of our suggestions from episodes 1 through 3 and would like to share how that turned out, feel free to do so in the comment section of any of those platforms, YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast. Lauren, I appreciate one of the major things about you, which I think we have not called out yet today, which is your grace and your ability to look at any situation and help someone reframe, no matter how lost they may be in their own fog. And so that is one of the things that I love about you, and one of the things that will always be an ever present sign when I think of not Lauren Phillip, when I think of Lauren Segura. That's what I think of is that, and your grace and just your dedication to your own development and to the development of everyone around you. So appreciate that.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Ditto. Love it.
Thank
Love the joy. Love the heart. Keep grounding us in taking those abstract ideas and turning them into practical habits, and reminding people that reflecting and journaling are important parts of the things that we do. So thanks for being with us. Really grateful for it. And to everyone listening, as you send your love to Dr. Lauren Segura for her incredible feedback and insights, I want to remind you to please take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great rest of your day.